Hey, everybody, welcome to the morning news update for December 5th, 2022, right here on Laughing Place TV. Just a reminder, if you're not watching us on Laughing Place TV, you're only getting part of the picture. So feel free to watch us on laughingplace.com/TV, where you get the entire picture, this show, plus more. So my name is Juby Mosley. I am the co-host of this show, and more importantly, the co-founder of this website, laughingplace.com. And joining me, as usual today, is my good buddy from the Midwest, Kyle Burbank. How you doing, Kyle?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I am doing great. So today's Walt's birthday. That's going to be a topic of conversation. But before we want to get there, we have to do some things that we always do. Kyle, how do we start every show when I'm actually here?
We check the stock price.
So let's check the Disney stock price today. Any prediction? Have you looked this morning, Kyle?
I haven't looked. I don't look. I'm a long-term Disney investor. I can't be going crazy with all the swings.
We don't do sensibility here. We want some day trading. So what do you think? Up, down today? I'll tell you the stock market as a whole is down about 1.6%.
I don't know. The Disney's probably down too.
You are good at this. Disney is down 2.67. Trying to get up to that magical 100 place again, but hasn't quite reached it.
Can't believe Iger didn't turn this around immediately.
S&P at 1.6, down 1.6%. Disney at 96.78. Will it get to 100 before the end of the year, Kyle?
I mean, it depends on the Fed. I think Jerome Powell has way more sway over this stock than Bob Iger.
That is well put. We have our own little Kyle Kramer here. That's pretty awesome.
Can I get a soundboard then?
Bam! No, that's Emerald. I don't think he does that. Someone's talking economics in here. Happy birthday! Happy birthday. Michael Strum is giving us a history of Disney and Hulu. Disney and Hulu are merging by 2024. Michael Strum has a prediction. Disney will integrate Hulu into Disney Plus, which is something they've done throughout the world, except for America, and something that we do expect to happen here. But thanks, Michael. I'm not sure who you are. If you know what you're talking about, write me at dubialaughplace.com. Maybe get on the show. We're not that picky. All right, so we're gonna bring on Alex first to talk about the new documentary that is dropping soon on Idina Menzel on Disney Plus. And Alex, how you doing?
I'm good. How about you guys?
I'm doing great. So Alex is our what is your? Do you have a title, Alex?
I don't know.
Dude.
Okay.
If I do, I don't know it.
Alex writes a lot, and he is a great writer. And so what is it you're here to talk to us about today?
I'm here to talk about Adele Dazeem, Which Way to the Stage, a new documentary film premiering Friday, December 9th on Disney Plus.
Well, so I know the embargo just ended at 9 a.m. this morning. What do you have to tell us about it?
I'm biased because I'm a huge Idina Menzel fan and have been really since Wicked took off. That's kind of when I became an Idina groupie. But it's a really cool film. It is all filmed in 2018 while she was on tour with Josh Groban and achieving a lifelong dream. The tour ended at Madison Square Garden, and as a Long Island native, it was always a dream of hers to play there. So you kind of get to be there for a big historic moment in her life. And as she goes on the tour, she kind of reveals bits and pieces about her life. So there was a lot in the film that I actually didn't know. It's surprisingly very intimate. It is not a talking head piece. So they're not interviewing other people. It's really Idina on Idina. And it is somewhat of a concert film. There are like almost full performances of Let It Go, Defying Gravity, For Good, Seasons of Love. So they pulled together kind of the big pieces. But things that I didn't know was after her breakout role in Rent, after that production ended, there was a huge valley for her. I knew she had a record deal with Hollywood Records, but I didn't know how big of a flop it was. She talks about going to shows to promote the record and only having 2 people be there.
Wow.
And so it was kind of surprising that between that and Wicked, really it was really tough for her to get work and do anything. They don't touch on it in the documentary, but one of my favorite Disney Idina Menzel connections is she took over the role of Amneris in Aida on Broadway, the Elton John Tim Rice production. So after the original cast was replaced, she was the next Amneris. And so in honor of that, I'm wearing my Elton John baseball jersey from his live show, and then my Spice World 25th anniversary hat, because on Elton John's version of the Aida soundtrack, where he had friends and collaborators perform the songs with him, Spice Girls did Dress as My Strongest Suit, that song, which was one of Amneris's big songs. But yeah, no, I loved the movie. Again, I'm biased. I'm already a huge Idina fan, but I feel like it was very approachable to anybody who might not know much about her, other than that she was the voice of Elsa in Frozen. And it's really her journey as a mother in her second marriage, trying to become a mother again. It deals with a lot of IVF treatment and the pressure that's putting on her as she's trying to complete this tour with Josh Groban.
How much actual concert performance do you say there is for those of us who
it's
really
a 90 yeah, it's a 90-minute film. I would say about 30 minutes of it contain her performing, but they're rarely completely uninterrupted. Like you'll maybe get like a chorus of a song, and then there'll be some like talking over it to kind of further the story, and then they'll go back to performance for a bit. Let It Go is one of the ones where you get like almost a complete performance. You get a lot of Do You Want to Build a Snowman, which I forget which song she mashes it up with, but she does it as like a mashup with a Beatles song.
Is there a lot in there, like talking about her home life, her husband, anything like that?
Yeah, not so much about Taye Diggs, other than, you know, that she's co-parenting with him. But yes, quite a bit about her current husband, Aaron. She tells the story of how they met, and she wasn't thinking she would really find love again. They don't ever mention that he's the singing voice of Max in a Goofy movie, but that's a fun fact for Disney fans. Yeah, so the voice of Elsa is married to the singing voice of Max, Goofy's son.
So I'm trying to picture Elsa. No, that's not a good thing to picture. Cool. When does this come to Disney Plus?
This Friday, December 9th.
And you recommend it without reservation, correct?
I gave it 5 out of 5 showers to wash off the green girl paint as my rating scale.
And the title is a reference to Rent.
The title is a reference to Rent, which I explain in my introduction in my review, for those who don't know it.
I don't really care for Rent.
I'm not a huge Rent fan, and I don't like the movie version of Rent, which has Idina Menzel in it.
I think I would prefer the movie version, because the thing that bothered me the most about the stage production is that there's constantly talk singing in between actual songs, and I prefer there to be songs and then regular talking.
Gotcha. My preferred way to watch Rent, not on stage, is a filmed production of the like final performance on Broadway when they were closing the show. So.
She does sing the second song in the show, 525 minutes.
So that's a yeah. She sings that in the film as a solo in the documentary, and then in Rent it's an ensemble piece by the whole cast.
Cool. That's the extent of my Rent knowledge. I love that song. I mean, that might be in my top 10 songs of all time. And I said, wow, check out this thing. Yeah. And then I realized, no, I just love the song. Before we let you go, Alex, I got to get something from you on Walt Disney's birthday. Anything Walt related you want to say?
What do you want from me? I don't know.
Do you have a Walt memory? I know you didn't know him personally, but a Walt memory,
I never
Walt inspiration, a Walt quote.
I mean, Walt Disney's my personal hero. Like as a child, learning about Walt and reading the Bob Thomas biography was probably one of the first like not aimed at my age group books that I ever read. And I remember just devouring that and learning so much and becoming really obsessed with Disney history through that. And I mean, I'm a huge fan of like the Walt Disney Treasures series. I guess my wish for Walt's birthday, what is this, 122nd? 21st.
121st. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
My wish for Walt's 121st birthday would be more Walt era content on Disney Plus. I'm a huge proponent of that. And if you haven't seen it yet, Mickey, the Story of a Mouse would probably be a good way to celebrate today if you're looking for something new. It's surprisingly real and honest. The first 30 minutes I found to be very fluffy just because I know so much about Mickey's story. And then they really get into the weeds of like Mickey during World War II. They show footage of things that you would never expect to see on Disney Plus from Mickey's early years. Shorts that are kind of buried on the Walt Disney Treasure sets. There's footage brought like front and center in that doc. So I would recommend checking that out.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for coming on as I vamp for Doobie. I know we are going to be bringing on Tony in just a moment, but I will let Doobie handle that.
Thanks, Kyle. You just step right in. Thanks a lot, Kyle, Alex, for your contributions here.
Yeah,
I hear you need to get back to work, so I'll let you get to it.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. Next up today, as we are moving on to a different subject. So there was a very provocative, is that a good word for it? Maybe tweet that was put out by, I guess the tweet wasn't provocative. The statement was provocative, but we saw it via a tweet.
Gotcha.
Brian Steinberg tweeted, he was tweeting, I think, the upfront for NBC Universal. And he tweeted what the CEO said, which is, quote, this is the NBC Universal CEO, "I honestly think that not only are we challenging Disney in animation, but I would take our animation business over theirs." And he cites Illumination and DreamWorks intellectual property. Now, that is a bold statement coming on the heels of Disney and Pixar releasing Lightyear and Strange World. But he made it, and so
Sure,
we have our
earnings call. They do theirs in the mornings for some reason.
Thank you very much for the earnings call. Thank you, Just Monitoring. Statboy for correcting me on that. So Tony, who is our animation guru here, he's going to come on and give his thoughts on whether or not is this completely out of whack, or maybe perhaps he's onto something here. So Tony Betty, welcome to the show.
Hello, good morning.
So are you familiar with this quote from the CEO of NBC Universal?
No, go on, tell me about it.
Did you not just hear what I said?
No, I'm joking anyway. No, it was CEO Jeff Shell, NBC Universal CEO. But if I had more time, I would full on get like the bulletin cork board back here and dry erase board, and we'll delve into a theory about history, about being cyclical, time being cyclical. And I think that's where we're at now. I wouldn't say the statement was bold. Hey, NBC Universal is challenging Disney animation. They've done that since the 80s in a way. Disney's always ruled the roost, but then in the 80s came Land Before Time, An American Tale with Spielberg attached. So, and that's, of course, the Black Cauldron era. So let's dive into this today.
Oh, here we go. Get comfortable, people.
The same thing. What you said, Strange World and Lightyear, and that's exactly what I have on my note, ironically, on a Disney Animation Studios ad. But you had Lightyear, which suffered because it was terribly mismarketed. They kept pumping it, saying it's not a Toy Story movie, but basically saying it's a Toy Story movie, and it's not a Toy Story movie. And then you had Strange World, which had no marketing at all. And Strange World is a weird thing into itself. And I liked the movie. I saw it. I liked it a lot. It won't be appreciated for another 20 years. It's going to be Atlantis and Treasure Planet all over again, where you have this formula that worked, i.e., Lion King, Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, all those. And then as we started like in the Hercules, Hunchback, Tarzan, and then we start getting into these other newer ideas like Atlantis and Treasure Planet, Dinosaur. Now we're falling into that thing again where it's Frozen 2, Encanto, and you have all these ones, and here's something new and different, and it's like, no, don't touch it, or in the company's case, don't even peddle it. Like, just throw it out there. And that's, I think, where we're at now. So while it's not fair for NBC Universal to say, hey, we're challenging, because it's not entirely just them being like, we've got the best stuff, everything Disney's kind of going overlooked right now. And you have these giant franchise entries like, Minions Rise of Gru from Illumination, and the upcoming Super Mario Brothers from Illumination. And then DreamWorks has The Bad Guys, which did really well. Uh, um, and then DreamWorks TV is also doing. I've got my notes here. The Croods Family Tree, Dragons in the Nine Realms, and those are also on Hulu, which goes back to his statement again, where he's saying they're going to be cutting us a check soon because of all those Hulu rights. So
I will let you know.
I don't think it's a fair statement to say like they're making it sound like Universal is doing better. I think if you put it all on a level playing field, we have all these options. It's a great time for animation right now, but I wouldn't say one's better than the other at this point because you have to look at all of it.
We have a commenter on LPTV, so you can't see that comment, but it says, "Sign me up for that Tony special." So if you want to get out your whiteboard and all that, let's see that happen.
All right. Is that commenter able to finance such a project?
Well, I mean, the commenter is my wife. No.
Okay.
Hold on.
So Tony,
if I had more time, here we go.
No, you don't. I know you said this is all cyclical, and we've seen this all before. But do you think are we as close as it's been, or has Disney been? I mean, obviously there were times in the '60s and stuff, but they didn't have a lot of competition back then. So, in terms of competition, is the biggest low we've had thus far for Disney relative to competition?
I would say since 2010. Yeah. So again, just like he said, in the last 10 years, nobody would have predicted that because in the last 10 years, you had Enchanted, you had Tangled, and although Enchanted is not animated, it kind of falls into that realm. You had Tangled, and then you started like building into Frozen. So 10 years ago, Jeff is right with that. 10 years ago, Disney was the ruler of the roost, and then they had Up from Pixar. Toy Story 3 from Pixar. But then, yeah, so I would say not maybe in the last 10 years like Jeff did, Disney was at the top, but 20 years ago, we're in that phase now where we're kind of lulling into it. But I don't think it'll last as long as it did 20 years ago because we have Wish coming up next year. And I think that one, because it pays homage in a way to the last 100 years, it's gonna be very unique. Sorry, I know you hate that.
I mean, also Encanto just happened, and even though if it wasn't like the highest box office totals, it's a huge cultural impact. So one flop from each of the Disney studios, it seems a little premature to say. It's kind of like the same thing when people were saying, "Oh, Harry Potter now they rule the theme park world." And it's like, okay, but then they went and did Fast and Furious after that. So
yeah, it's true. So, but and then Encanto again also didn't do good in theaters. This is a whole other side conversation about how Disney's basically trained the audience now to wait for Disney Plus.
Train their audience.
Yeah, there you go. From
another DreamWorks movie.
Yep. But they basically have done that to say wait for Disney Plus. So I don't think it's even fair to judge Strange World's success until it hits Disney Plus. But
I mean, obviously we'll wait and see. But Encanto, while it may not have been the biggest box office hit in the world, it was a cultural hit long before Disney
once
Plus.
It hit Disney Plus.
Really?
Nobody talked about it till it hit Disney Plus, and then
they weren't supposed to. The song told them not to.
If you really want to get into it, it really didn't hit until TikTok took over and everybody started doing the Bruno dance.
And when did that movie come out?
Last Christmas, which was also when I gave you my heart.
Yeah, but then the very next day, I gave it away. If you could, wrong comment. If you could purchase one of these businesses, would you put your future in Disney or Comcast animation business?
I would. This is kind of a weird, narcissistic answer. Not really narcissistic. I would say Comcast because Disney, you have a bar to hit, and I don't. That would be a lot of pressure. Whereas Comcast is kind of like, I can't do any worse than the last guy sometimes. So.
And my 77 makes a great point. I mean, obviously Disney has huge cultural relevance. Bruno, we don't talk about Bruno, became a huge thing, but Minions to a slightly less. I mean, Minions alone is just one of the hugest things in the world. When was the last time? Is Frozen even at that level? Does Disney
Olaf,
create
that snowman?
I don't think Olaf approaches Minions in terms of cultural relevance.
You sure?
No, I'm telling you.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
Well, there are more Minions than Olafs.
I would say there are more Minions than Olafs, yes, but and also I think it depends what like circles you pay attention to also. But
I think we should look at banana sales and see who.
Yeah. Well, that's
All
going to
right,
change
Tony.
soon when Donkey Kong and Super Mario Brothers. So
Oh man, can you imagine that mashup?
Super Mario in the
Donkey
metaverse.
Kong,
Have you not watched the
mashup?
trailer? Donkey Kong's in the Mario Brothers movie.
No, Minions get in
Oh.
there too because of the whole banana thing.
Oh, got it.
Tony,
Yo,
thank you for that contribution. Before we let you go, Walt Disney, give me something on Walt Disney. It's his birthday today.
Kurt Russell.
Tom
This is
Hanks.
what makes Tony. This is what makes Tony Tony.
No, what was his famous quote? It's solely Walt Disney who said it too, right? If we can dream it, we can do it.
Oh, why did I ask? Tony Betty, the host of the nightly show here on LPTV, 10:30 p.m. Pacific time.
Is that official yet? Do I get my budget?
No.
Because I got a whiteboard.
You have no budget. You have no budget. It's not official. Thanks for joining us, Tony. I hear you have to get back to work too, so I'm gonna let you go.
Something
'Cause,
about emailing and wands and stuff like that. So yes.
Tony is one of our minions, so he needs to get back to him.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tony, and thank you, Alex. For this next story, it's just going to be me and you, Kyle. I hope one of us has read it. I hope one of us has read the news. So apparently, Pixar Day at Sea is coming back to the
Yes.
Disney Cruise Line.
Yes, so they offered
And,
some more details here about some of the different characters and different entertainment offerings. I think there was a deck party with the Incredibles. Is that what it was?
Yeah, it's called the
Probably the Incredibles on deck or something like that.
no, it's got a cool name.
Okay.
Celebrate an incredible deck party. Celebrate the supers.
I was not very far off.
So that sounds pretty cool to me. Okay, I'm sorry. Tony can't offer a serious take on the birthday because he would get emotional. That's probably true. I mean, that's not funny, but it's kind of funny. All right. So yes,
Celebrate the Supers is a bit of a weird title.
and it's fun. So this is how they put it. They receive a smooth sailing award for a spectacular day at sea. That is until Jack is discovered on the loose aboard the ship. On the loose about the ship. I don't know if that's a typo or they're trying to sound a little pompous, but it says on the loose about the ship. Action, antics, and surprises ensue, ending with a fireworks finale that will send the Incredibles and your family off in super spirits. So, the Incredibles, Pixar Day at Sea, Disney Cruise Line does their at-sea things. They have Star Wars Day at Sea, Marvel Day at Sea, and I think Pixar Day at Sea is the most recent. They've done it before. This is not the first time, but they do have some incredible enhancements this time. It starts on January 7th for 9 7-night sailings on the Disney Fantasy. And I've not done any of these at seas myself. I've done tons of Disney cruises, but I've never done a at sea cruise. I've read about them and seen vlogs about them, and they really go all out. If you're interested in the topic, whether it's Marvel or Star Wars or Pixar, you're going to have a great time. Especially if you love characters, because it's just character galore. Who's your favorite Pixar character, Kyle?
Oh, my favorite Pixar character. Maybe probably Mike Sully, because that's my favorite Pixar movie, so that makes sense. But I do want to emphasize, as the person who hasn't done a cruise, I know this, that at sea, a lot of times when they're promoting these things, it doesn't mean that the entire cruise is themed to these things. It's really just one day where you are not going to port, you're just at sea. So that's kind of where it comes from. I think if you haven't done a cruise before, you might just conflate this as being an overall 7-day theme, and that's not the case.
That is an excellent point to make. It is definitely one of the sea days, and hence the day at sea. And if you are interested in booking such a cruise, we highly recommend you use our travel partner, the people we use for booking all of our cruises, Mouse Fan Travel. Tell them Laughing Place sent you, and you will not regret it. As always, it costs not one dime extra to book your cruise through a Disney travel agent like Mouse Fan Travel, and they take care of a lot of the hassle that can come along with these things, as well as give you some special perks along the way. Just monitoring, our stat boy says, I want a Comcast animation day at sea. I think that is in the works when Disney and Comcast merge. All right, next up on the agenda is, of course, Walt Disney's birthday. Happy birthday, Walt. Walt Disney would have turned 121 today, but he died in 1966. So has he now been dead longer than he was alive?
I don't want to math.
65 went. Yeah, of course he has. Yes. Wow. Seems like just yesterday. So, of course, this is a big deal to a lot of people that we associate with, including one CEO of Disney, Bob Iger, who we don't actually associate with. But so he was appropriately enough tweeted this morning, Walt Disney would have turned 121 years old today. How lucky we are for the life he lived and the legacy he left. Happy birthday, Walt. So beautiful sentiment there from Robert A. Iger, don't you think, Kyle?
Yep. I like to think he probably would have put out such a message even if he was not the CEO once again.
You like to think that, but are you sure?
I'm not sure. I'm inclined. I mean, if he's following the Michael Eisner path of things, then yeah, I think he totally would have.
Did Eisner tweet?
If we see an Eisner thing today.
I was going to say, did Michael Eisner tweet?
You know what? I don't keep tight tabs on Michael Eisner, but I would not be surprised if at some point today he did.
Yeah, for some reason, I was thinking 65 times 2 is 110. So no, Walt Disney has not yet been dead longer than he was alive. It's 130. Hopefully someone's taking care of that chat for us. All right. We're going to show a quick video. This was a video put out by D23 last year, actually. I'm guessing it said 1 year ago on YouTube, so I'm guessing it was actually probably Walt's birthday last year. And we're going to show it in its entirety. It's only about 5 minutes long. 5 things about Walt Disney you may not have known. Let's watch together.
It's kind of fun to do the impossible, like picking only 5 facts about Walt Disney. Fact 1. Walt Disney was born in Chicago, the 4th of 5 children, on December 5th, 1901. When he was 4, he and his family moved to Marceline, Missouri, which would later inspire the idea for Main Street USA in Disneyland. Throughout his life, Walt would return to Marceline and would even donate one of Disneyland's original Autopias to his hometown. In 1919, at 17 years old, Walt returned to Kansas City, Missouri from Europe. He served in France right after World War I, driving an ambulance and doing other cleanup chores for about 9 months as the troops were getting ready to come home. Soon after, he made plans to open his own studio, but not the one you might be thinking. Fact 2. At 20 years old, Walt started his own company, Laugh-O-Gram Films. The studio produced 7 modernized versions of fairy tales. They also produced an unreleased pilot called Alice's Wonderland, which impressively mixed live action with animation. Similar techniques would be used many years later in Disney films like Mary Poppins and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Also under the Laugh-O-Gram Films banner, Walt adapted Cinderella in 1922, along with titles such as Goldilocks and the Three Bears and Jack and the Beanstalk. When Laugh-O-Gram Films closed in 1923, Walt moved to Hollywood in July of that year at 21 years old, with just $40 in cash, a suitcase, and a dream of becoming a director. Just a few years later, Walt came up with the idea for a fun-loving animated fellow, who's still beloved to this day. You know him, you'll love him, everyone's favorite, Lucky Rabbit. Fact 3. In 1927, Walt and animators like Ub Iwerks started to produce shorts centered around a character Walt had created named Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Everything was going great for the newly formed Disney Brothers Studio, until Walt lost creative control of Oswald in 1928. The Walt Disney Company would later welcome Oswald back into the fold, but that wouldn't be until 2006. From this experience, Walt conceived a new, happy-go-lucky character. Say it with me, Mortimer Mouse. Who's that? Walt's wife Lillian thought that name was terrible and suggested Mickey Mouse as an adorable alternative alliteration. Mickey made his debut in 1928 in Steamboat Willie, the first fully synchronized sound-on-film cartoon. Mickey didn't speak until 1929 in The Carnival Kid, and who better to voice the character than the man himself?
We fooled him. Oh, yeah?
Hot dogs! Hot dogs! Those were Mickey's first words, and where better to enjoy a hot dog than Disneyland? Fact 4. In the early 1950s, Walt had the idea for what would become the happiest place on Earth. Walt had built a 1/8 scale steam locomotive with a half-mile of track that circled his home. Yet, he wanted something bigger, so plans were made to build a park with a full-size train across from the Disney studio in Burbank. Plans grew even bigger still, and Walt and his research team decided a 160-acre orange grove in Anaheim would be the ideal spot for what would become known as Disneyland. The original Disneyland took just shy of 1 year to construct, from July 1954 to opening day July 17th, 1955. Several opening day attractions like Jungle Cruise and Autopia still exist today, but there's one attraction that many don't realize was Walt's idea. Fact 5. The concept for a space mountain was originally conceived by Walt and developed by Imagineer John Hench in 1965, even though it wouldn't open at Magic Kingdom Park until 1975. Walt wanted to do something no one had ever done before. Build a roller coaster ride in the dark with complete control over lighting and projections on the interior walls. You can even see concept art for Space Mountain in this Disneyland park map from 1967, a decade before the ride would open at Disneyland in 1977. Talk about Tomorrowland. Today, the attraction can be enjoyed by visitors at Disneyland, Walt Disney World, Tokyo Disneyland, Disneyland Paris, and Hong Kong Disneyland as the legacy lives on. Thanks for watching. Let us know what other Disney topics you would like to learn more about. And Walt, is there anything you would like to add?
I only hope that we never lose sight of one thing, that was all started by a mouse.
You're muted, because that's how we roll.
That was, of course, from D23, the official Disney fan club. There's actually a couple more Walt videos I wanted to show today. It's nice when the company gets involved with such an important day. So GMA, Good Morning America, they tweeted a short Walt video. This is only 1 minute long. We'll watch that one as well on his birthday.
This concept here will have to be something that is unique, and so that there is a distinction between Disneyland California and whatever Disney does. Notice I didn't say Disneyland in Florida. Whatever Disney does in Florida.
Welcome to a little bit of Florida here in California. This is where the early planning is taking place for our so-called Disney World project. In fact, the heart of everything we'll be doing in Disney World will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow. We call it Epcot. It will be a community of tomorrow that will never be completed, but will always be introducing and testing and demonstrating new materials and new systems.
So yes, as we know, Walt Disney definitely foresaw Remy's Ratatouille adventure.
Exactly. I was going to say, I love how they're like, yeah, big. It's always going to be doing something different, testing new systems, like this clone of a ride that we built at the worst park in the chain.
This is not the day for cynicism, Kyle. It is Walt Disney's.
I'm not being cynical about Walt. I'm being cynical about the producers of that.
Yeah, I know, but still. All right, I got one more I want to show. This one was tweeted by Carl Quintanilla from NBC and CNBC. And this is from BBC Archives. I think this is probably pretty well known, but it's got some cool stuff in it. So this is about 5 minutes long, and then we'll come back. We'll talk a little more about Walt Disney ourselves. Kyle, think about this question.
Okay.
You're a Martian from Venus who has come to Earth via Jupiter, and you've heard about this guy, Walt Disney. What is your number one resource to go learn why he is so great? Don't answer now. Think about that question. Here we go.
In those early days, Walt Disney himself was the voice of Mickey Mouse. Now he's a tycoon at the center of a vast business empire. Mr. Disney, can you still make a noise like Mickey Mouse?
Well, yes, but of course I don't make many Mickey Mouse films.
Can you make that noise for us now?
Well, Mickey used to talk something like this, kind of a falsetto. Of course, he's an old mouse now, and the falsetto getting a little old.
Yeah, well, now, when you first dreamed up these characters, did you think of them as simply as comic animals, or were you concerned with them as human personalities?
Well, no, I'd say human personalities in the body of a cartoon animal. It was just a way to sort of crowd our way into with the competition,
But the competition of animated cartoons?
Yes, in those days I had Felix the Cat to compete with, and I can't remember all the others, but you just had to get in there, and you had to make them funnier or better, or I don't know what.
Well, the character of Donald Duck is probably even better known than that of Mickey, I'd say, isn't it? I mean, this very angry man who always seems to be getting into terrible scrapes. in the
Better?
form of a duck.
No, I
Now,
don't know whether he's better known. Mickey is very well known around the world. But the duck came along as a result of too many taboos put onto Mickey Mouse. People didn't feel that Mickey could blow his top like the duck. In other words, he had to maintain a certain dignity. So in order to give ourselves a latitude, we created this little duck. This is terrible-tempered Mr. Duck.
as an outlet for yourself.
Yes, and it gave us the contrast that we needed in the film. Now, I used to team Mickey and the duck together at one time. And also, at one time, I had all 4 of these characters in one film at one time. Then I divided them up, and each one had his own film. Each one had his own show.
But what about the charges of cruelty made against you in relation to the earlier film, the Donald Duck film, the extreme
Where we'd hit him on the
human-
head or something
that
like
sort
that?
of thing. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. That comes from, I didn't invent that. That comes from Punch and Judy. I mean, that's been going on for centuries.
Were your films principally designed for children?
Well, no, you have to appeal to the adult, or, well, the adults have the money. The children don't have any money.
But so that there was nothing childish in your intent.
No, we sort of designed the films to appeal to ourselves, and we're our own censors within the studio group. If we do something that isn't right, we hear from the various members of the staff it just isn't right. You can't do that. And I never test a film beyond the studio. Of course, I have enough employees there that are not actively engaged in the creative phases, that they would be what I'd call a non-critical audience. They'd be closer to the public. So I test my films with my own people.
Mr. Disney, in recent years, you started producing these films of real animals, these real animal films like Bear Country and so on.
The nature films.
The nature films. Now, how much of this is this a direct result of your imagination working with imaginary animals?
Well, it's an offshoot of our development. Before I went into production on Bambi, I took my orders through a special course in animal anatomy. We were getting a little closer to the real animal in Bambi. And with these characters, they're not actually close to the actual animal itself. So animal anatomy is a thing that is not taught properly in the art school. So I started a special course in animal anatomy. Brought animals into the studio in our art classes. Instead of live models, we had animal models. But I found that the animals in captivity are not themselves. What you see of an animal in a zoo is not actually what the animal is when he's out in nature itself. So I sent camera crews out into the wilds to capture what an animal actually does in his way of life. And from the film that I brought in for the artist to study, I realized that there was a great story there that had never been told. So then, with some of these crews that I put together for this research work, I started in doing some nature films. And with time, they developed to a point where I made 7 short subjects. And by that time, we had developed to a point where I felt we could tackle a nature feature. And the first one was called The Living Desert.
Would you rather be making these films than these earlier films, Mickey and Goofy and Donald and all?
Well, I like to make films, and I've always enjoyed making short subject films because you can put a short subject together in a hurry. You have all the latitude of any little thing that comes to you. Spur of the moment, you can put it in, and you don't have to sustain interest for an hour. It's fun to make a short subject. With a feature, you have to be very careful because you must sustain interest for an hour and 20 to 25 minutes. But I enjoy making all kinds of films.
Disney, thank you very much indeed.
That was pretty awesome. I think everyone watching caught on to the fact that he said
Mickey Mouse.
animation appealing to adults.
Yes.
Yes, that was pretty funny. It's cool to hear Walt talk and not sell. You know, there's plenty of videos out there doing his Walt Disney Presents thing, but just to hear him sitting down for an interview and answering questions is just a man and a businessman, as we heard. And, you know, they both have the money and all that. That's really interesting. So hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. Kyle, I asked you a question before we showed that. Martian comes down from Venus. There's this guy, Walt Disney, wants to learn about him. What's the #1 resource? And don't say laughingplace.com.
I wasn't going to say. I was like, I hope you're not setting me up. I was going to say the Walt Disney Archives.
Okay, that's good. That's obviously a great place. I like Walt, the Man Behind the Myth, which is not easy to find these days, I don't think. It's not streaming anywhere that I could find. It was a DVD 20 years ago. But I did find on YouTube what I didn't watch it, but it says it's the director's commentary of it, and it is full length. So you can at least see it all and hear some of it. So have you seen that one, that documentary?
No, I haven't. I don't know if I've ever seen any. Well, I guess I've seen like the PBS American Masters, if you count that as a documentary. I've seen that, but I haven't watched many things on him except like Saving Mr. Banks, which isn't really about him, but he's a part of that. And I've never seen Walt Before Mickey, which I think John Heater was in that movie. I haven't seen that biopic not too long ago.
Yeah. Can I ask, just monitoring that question? Is he willing to come on and answer that?
He's staring like a Bambi in the headlights.
Can you come on? Yeah. How would you answer that question, Ben? The best resource for an introduction to Walt Disney?
I mean, I think the Bob Thomas book, they're putting out an updated version for the Disney 100. I think it's a great primer. It doesn't have the full story, but I would also then say if you have the time, then read the Roy Disney biography, because it gives you Roy's perspective on his brother. It's a little less idealistic, but I would say those two give a pretty full and accurate picture, without getting too academic.
And for those who are into the academics, there are plenty of academic essays and books and such on Walt Disney as well, if you want to really dive deep and fall asleep as you read. So
well, I mean, and the thing is the more I'm in it, every day he had probably a meeting that could be a book, right? There's a great new book on the True Life Adventures series, and going deep into that. I mean, there's books about his appreciation for Kem Weber's design and the design of the studio. I mean, there's every little bit is interesting. So, but if you want a high level stuff, but there's always more to learn when it comes to
Walt Disney Story on VHS. Is that the one with
Diane?
Yes. Yeah. I remember going to an event for that at the Opera House. Of course, the Bob Thomas book is kind of the definitive one. Kyle says he has one. No, not Kyle, Tony. But Tony, you're not visible. I can't bring you on without your face. So you've got 10 seconds, Tony.
PBS American Originals, Walt Disney. It's like 5 hours long.
That's a good one. I'm glad you came on to say that. That is excellent.
Yep.
Thanks, Tony. All right. And cool. So Walt Disney birthday. Happy birthday, Walt. 121.
Walter, it's your birthday. Happy birthday, Walter.
Wonder what he would be doing. I'm going to ask you this question, Kyle.
Okay. Good. I'll...
Walt Disney died at 65, still a relatively young man. 65, still a relatively young man. Very much working on the company day to day. Somehow he's just been sleeping for the past 50 plus years, wakes up, and this is the Walt Disney Company. How does he react?
I think he'd probably want to spend some of that money that they've been making on some more experimental things. Like, I think if he would have stayed alive, like obviously he had some business sense and his brother kind of kept him in check, but I feel like we would have had some really out there things that would have been massive commercial flops. So I think he'd want to, especially with like the I think he'd be very interested in the filmmaking technology and want to really try to push the bounds of it and make things that might not be appealing to too many people, but would thrill him to death again.
And he wasn't afraid to do stuff that wasn't necessarily, I don't think he thought Fantasia, maybe I'm wrong, was going to be a huge commercial success, or Walt and El Grupo and all that kind of stuff. But he wanted to do what he wanted to do, which is kind of a privilege you have, even with a public company. It's a privilege you have with the track record he had, and when your name is on the business, that would be much harder to do these days. But yeah, that's a very interesting thought.
Benji's shaking his head at me.
Why Benji is shaking his head? What are you shaking your head at? Benji?
I think it's important to remember that the public company of the Walt Disney Productions did not want to fund Disneyland, so he had to create a separate company to do Disneyland. So, I think he would have done his own thing. How it would have fit in a corporate environment, particularly now that, it's corporations are under more of a microscope than perhaps they were back then. Would be interesting. Would he have, kind of created another thing? I also think he would have never done it, but I think he'd be tickled pink that he owns ABC. Of
course.
He owns ABC, just given how much he relied on them and then how much they pissed him off later. So I think that would be. I don't think he was. He wasn't a deal maker in terms of bringing things in, but I don't think he would be as against it as. I think he would be proud that he was as a Hollywood outsider essentially for so much that his company ended up owning so much of Hollywood. I think he would enjoy.
Do you think he'd appreciate owning ESPN?
First he would ask, what is ESPN? And then he would ask, why is there not more polo on it?
Thanks, Ben. All right, we're going to move on to our next topic, which is going to feature one of my favorite guests on anything I ever talk to him on, Mike Celestino. How you doing, Mike?
Wow, that's a high honor. I'm honored, really.
I love talking to Mike. So Mike is going to talk to us about a couple of things you did this weekend. LA Comic-Con and what, Mike?
Well, first I have a bone to pick about a particular turn of phrase that we've been using talking about Walt Disney. Bob Iger said it in his tweet this morning, and then you said it earlier in the stream I was watching. You said Walt Disney would be 121 years old today had he not passed away in 1966. And I just
don't be Tony. Go ahead, Mike.
What kind of superhuman do you think he was?
Had he not passed away in 1966 or any time between then and now.
I'd like to point out that Mike is fired for not thinking that Walt Disney was a superhuman.
He was a superhuman.
That is an excellent point.
Even if he had died of old age, he probably wouldn't have made it to 121. But sorry. There were two competing conventions that I attended this weekend as media here in Southern California. One was called, this one was the first one I went to on Friday night. It's called Season Screamings. It's a combo Halloween and Christmas convention put on by our friends over at Midsummer Scream. It was a lot of fun. I went to the preview night only because I didn't have time to go to the rest of the weekend. And then yesterday I spent the day at LA Comic-Con at the Los Angeles Convention Center in downtown LA. And they were both a lot of fun. I got to go to the 30th anniversary X-Men, the animated series panel at LA Comic-Con. And then I walked around the floor and took pictures and tweeted them out. It was a good time.
Let's start with Comic-Con. So you did send out a bunch of tweets from there, which are awesome. What are some of the fun stuff you got to see over there?
Lots of cool cosplay. I tried to tweet the Disney-related ones that I thought stood out to me. And then I saw our friend Bob Gurr. So the funny thing was, both of these conventions are happening at the same time. Season Screaming is in Pasadena. LA Comic-Con is in downtown LA, not terribly far from each other. But on Friday night, Bob Gurr was there signing autographs and taking photos with people. And I just kind of assumed, he's in the Haunted Orange County booth, which he appears at usually at Midsummer Scream. So that made sense to me. And I just assumed, he's going to be here all weekend in that booth. I tweeted out his photo. And then on yesterday when I was at LA Comic-Con, I saw that Bob Gurr also has a booth at the LA Comic-Con. And I don't know how the man keeps up. He's got a lot of verve. And I had this conspiracy theory that he may there may be two Bob Gurrs, that he's cloned himself and sharing the wealth, spreading the wealth among all these conventions. So everybody who wants to meet him can meet him.
He is an engineer. I do not put it past him to have figured out a way to clone himself.
Yeah.
So, right. I know you tweeted this one here. You said, "Love this BD1 puppet."
Yeah, a rare vertical video from me. I realized that as I was shooting it. It's not it just became second nature, I guess. But yeah, this is BD1, the droid from Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, the video game, and just a really cool puppet that one of these Star Wars fans has put together.
Not to be confused with BD Wong.
Not BD Wong, no, from Jurassic Park.
Cool, Max
Rebo with a human hand, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Not playing with their feet. They're not that dedicated.
Right.
Hot Topic had some nice Nightmare Before Christmas. This is a cool looking booth, right?
Yeah, I couldn't get in. The line was really long to get into the booth, but just from the outside of the booth, I was able to take some photos. It did look really neat.
So I know the Brazil Comic-Con happened recently, and it had some insanely huge announcements and trailers. What do we get out of this one?
Out of LA Comic-Con? Not LA Comic-Con is not really known for its announcements. So I was thinking about the history of this convention yesterday. I think it started as something called Kamikaze, and then it became Stan Lee's LA Comic-Con, or vice versa. I'm not sure which one of those was first. There's Bob Gurr at his booth.
I don't know which was first, but I definitely heard Stan Lee's Kamikaze.
Yeah. And obviously Stan Lee passed away, unfortunately, and they stopped using his name. And now it's just LA Comic-Con. But it's not nearly as big. Honestly, I had never heard of Brazil Comic-Con before last week. But apparently that's a really big deal. And something like San Diego Comic-Con is a really big deal. But LA Comic-Con is really just... It feels like more of a local event, even though it is in one of the biggest cities. It doesn't have the presence of the major studios or anything yet. It does feel like it's getting bigger every year. So I will say maybe eventually we'll get to that point. There were some celebrity guests that I missed because I didn't go on Saturday. And then I saw like William Shatner was there yesterday. So they do have some good celebrities now, but I think it's kind of steadily growing as it goes on.
Cool. And then the other event, Season Screamings. What stands out from there?
Yeah, a lot of cool booths, a lot of cool like photo ops. It's more for horror fans, I think, than general pop culture, because this thing started. First of all, the Rick West, he started over at what is that called? Scare LA was the name of the convention that started all this, and then that splintered off into Midsummer Scream, and now Midsummer Scream has spun off into Season Screamings during the holiday season, and it's just kind of a fun mashup between the two holidays. It's sort of like a Nightmare Before Christmas themed convention, but with everything else that you can put into that category.
Bob Gurr looking good. I like that.
Yeah. I mentioned that I was from Laughing Place, and the first thing he said was he started talking about how he said your name, Doobie, and he said how you gave him the opportunity to write for the website back in the day. So.
Yeah. So two of the coolest things about Laughing Place back in the early days, Bob Gurr, I saw him at an event at Walt's Bar and just went up to him out of nowhere, said, "Hey, I've got this website. Would you be interested in writing a column for us?" And he started writing a monthly column, literally from the beginning to the end of his career on Laughing Place. And then he ultimately wrote a book, which consisted in large part of the column. So we removed it from our site for, at his request, because he was selling a book. But yeah. I love that we just had Bob Gurr do his biography on our site. Designer Times, he called it. And then Exitentio, another very famous Imagineer, we interviewed him for the debut of Laughing Place. We had 3 Haunted Mansion articles when we debuted on August 1st, 1999. And I learned much later from his daughter, I believe, that an email exchange I had with him was the very first time he had ever received an email or sent an email. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, back to this. So
the other cool thing about both Midsummer Scream and Season Screamings is they have this at Midsummer Scream it's called the Hall of Shadows, and at Season Screaming it's called the Hall of Yuletide Spirits, I think. And it's just it's kind of like a scare zone within the convention. And this year's Hall of Yuletide Spirits was just so wonderfully decorated with Christmas lights. Again, you had the mashup between the Christmas and the horror theme, which is very creative. And then within that section, they had the Pizza Planet truck, but it was getting attacked by gremlins from the movie Gremlins. So I just thought it was very look how cool that is. There's some heads on pikes here, so content warning.
Good point. But we'll let it run, I think.
There's nothing worse than
a short
that,
video here. Do you have the Toy Story vehicle in this
it's
one?
not in the video, but I did tweet out photos of it after this. I just loved the way that they decorated this. I thought that was so cool.
Cool. Awesome, Mike. Anything else you wanted to bring up from either one of these two events?
I'm trying to remember. There were some cool booths at Season Screaming selling Disney-inspired merchandise, I would say. Like, it's a lot of handmade, handcrafted art inspired by the Haunted Mansion and other Disney properties, Nightmare Before Christmas, of course. But yeah, there's a lot of cool merch to pick up if you're looking for holiday gifts. Not that you can go anymore, it's over, so it doesn't help for me to promote it anymore, though I will be writing up a photo post about both conventions soon.
Cool. We'll look for that on Laughing Place, of course. And then I hear you've got something fun coming up later today, Mike.
Yeah, Jeremiah and I are heading out to Palm Springs to check out Walt's plane, which actually I didn't get to see at D23 Expo. I missed it, so I'm glad to be able to see it now.
Well, I hope you don't get caught in an infinite loop out there.
Yeah.
Are you guys driving together?
Yeah, he's going to pick me up at like 1 o'clock, I think.
All right, so can you do me a favor? I'd like to live stream your whole ride out there because I just picture that being somehow interesting. So I'll send you a link and then just turn on the camera, pretend like it's not there, and we'll make this happen.
All right. Sure.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Do you remember the date you're going to be on Disney Trivia Live?
Yeah, December 20th. It's quickly approaching, and I have some preparation to do. So I'm trying to scramble to find time, but it hasn't happened yet. But I'm going to make it happen.
I might have misspoke and said you're going to be on. I know you're going to be producing and procuring a guest. I'm not sure if it's going to be you or someone else.
I won't say anything either. We'll just we'll let it be a fun surprise.
Okay. So looking forward to that. You get the best guest on Disney Trivia Live. Thanks for joining us, Mike. Enjoy the rest of your Disney day. Oh, I forgot to ask you, Walt Disney, memory, personal interaction, or just something you love about him, anything?
I remember there was you guys are talking about the documentary, the PBS documentary that Tony has the DVD for, but I remember on the Disney Channel when I was probably 4 or 5 years old, they used to run this. It was run during the commercials, I think, on the Disney Channel. It was this short documentary about Walt Disney that always started with him. I don't know. There was that particular drawing he's doing on camera of Mickey Mouse, and he drew that the tail is kind of like a wave. I just remember that sticking out in my memory as being like the first time I learned about who Walt Disney was.
I like that. That's such a wholesome contribution.
And then I always like going. We don't live too far from Griffith Park here in Burbank, because Griffith Park kind of stretches from Hollywood all the way up to the northern part of the Hollywood Hills there into the valley. So we live pretty close to where Walt would have sat at the Griffith Park carousel and had the idea for Disneyland. So every time I'm there, I always like to go and stand in that spot and think, this is where Disneyland was born.
Okay.
Get some peanuts.
Yeah.
That must be a very cool thing, just to go to the spot and know that, however many years ago Walt was there. And
and then I always point out when we pass by the Burbank lot, the Disney Studio lot on Burbank, I always point out the ABC building and the animation building, the current animation building, and say that's where Disneyland was originally planned. That was the plot of land where Disneyland would have been if Walt had lived to 121 years old.
And on that note, we've come full circle. Thank you, Mike Celestino, for joining us today. Enjoy your car ride with Jeremiah.
Thank you. I will.
A couple other quick things. I see that Scott Gustin, who is as a reliable a blue check as comes in the Disney world. Goodness, I could have thought of a better term than that. Has confirmed what has been going around the Twitterverse that Indiana Jones is closing from January 9th through spring 2023. Which is kind of a long refurbishment, but I guess not for an attraction that opened in 1995.
Depends on what spring is defined as, but of course the speculation here is that whatever refurbishment could tie into the new Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
If you had to bet an amount of money that mattered to you, is that the case, or are they just doing a long refurb for an attraction that I rode a couple weeks ago and knows just needs it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't think anything's going to be significant. There could be tiny little nods to a new movie, but yeah, I don't think that's long enough for any significant story changes. But
I would agree.
Could be wrong.
I mean, Tiana's Bayou Adventure is going to take like over a year in Walt Disney World.
After 2 years of just talking about it, not even doing anything.
So, and as people are saying, if Indy's going to be closed from January to spring, they have not given a closing date for Disneyland Splash Mountain. One would perhaps assume that it will not close while Indy is closed, and wait at least until Indy reopens. So, don't have too many major attractions closed at the same time.
Kermit get to open at Disneyland.
It's a good question. It wasn't Indiana Jones.
Rise now.
Yeah, Rise. Thank you. But prior to that, it was Indy, right?
Yeah.
And then, would you consider Runaway Railway Indy ticket?
Probably. Well, no.
Yes, is the answer. Yes.
Okay.
That's the actual answer.
D. I give it a D. Because I don't know, it's not thrilling per se.
Neither is Pirates.
Yeah. It was at the time. I'm sure there's some people that think that drop is just like insane.
And it is because you get wet. You get wet on that drop every single. It is so annoying to ride Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland, knowing you're going to get wet for no good reason. Anyway, Kermit the Frog has been busy this morning. So Bob McGrath from Sesame Street passed away.
Sesame Street.
I don't know why I wanted to say SeaWorld. From Sesame Street passed away. Kermit the Frog tweeted, "There was no one quite like my friend Bob McGrath. His infectious joy and remarkable voice could make every day sunnier. I'll always remember the wonderful times we shared on Sesame Street. Let's all sing a song for Bob today," which is absolutely beautiful. And all right, let's move on to some fun stuff before we whoop, 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 whoop. Yes, that probably knew the whoop, 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 whoop. Japan Airlines, the leader in cool livery. Is it livery or livery?
I actually don't even know. Never said it out loud.
All right, so if anyone out there knows if it's livery or livery, please let me know. But I'm going to go with livery right now. Has shown what their Disney 100 livery is going to look like, and oh my, this is some cool stuff. Did you see this, Kyle?
I did see this. I think it's better. They at the top of whatever article I originally saw this on, it had the Mickey 90. I'm like, that was like 5 years ago. So then I scrolled down a little bit and saw this.
Yeah.
It's fun. I don't know if it's the best for a plane. I've seen better ways that they integrate the actual design with what a plane has. This kind of just looks like the equivalent of a billboard on either side, but it's kind of fun.
It looks very fun, and the fun doesn't stop on the outside of the plane.
That was going to be my next question because I didn't read the full article yet.
Yeah, so this is not the article I meant to have. Here's the one that's actually in English, which helps me a lot. So they say they're going to have themed interior, customized headrest covers, and themed catering projects such as drink cups featuring iconic Disney characters, and you can see some of that artwork here. So, Kyle, have you flown Japan Airlines? I know you've been to Japan.
No, I have not flown Japan Airlines. Never flown. I'm not even sure I'm sure they have presence. Like I've seen them at international destinations. ANA is honestly the one that comes to mind first when I think of Japanese airlines.
But now you need to switch because
Maybe. I mean, we'll have to. This is one of those things we like to look up the tail number and see where it flies. Sometimes it's just a specific route; it just goes back and forth, and other times it, pops around.
Well, it is JA615J, so you can check that out. It's 767-300 ER. ER stands for extended range.
Yes,
so it might fly a long way. This is the Mickey's 90 years you were referring to.
Well, Japan's an island, so usually has to fly a decent amount.
I know I'm into airplanes, and they use, or at least in the past, I don't know if they still do, huge 747s to
747s.
Just
there's only a few of them left, but yes.
Just to island hop from an hour. Usually you think 747 going on this long flight, but you can pack 500 plus people in there, and even though there's only an hour flight, it makes sense because of how many people you can transport at once. So
yeah, there are still some routes where they do that, like Atlanta to Orlando. Sometimes it's a pretty big plane just because there's a lot of demand going down to Disney World.
I've seen that. I always assumed they just needed to reposition the plane, not that they had that many people.
Yeah.
And my wife got to do that on her last trip, and I was so mad I didn't. I want to be on I can't remember the last time I was on a 2-aisle plane. I really want to do that.
A wide body. When's the last time you were on a 2-story plane?
Tony, are you there? We want to talk to you again. Dude, my dream is to fly an A380. Tony, have you seen this tweet?
Hello. I did. Actually, that just got sent to me. That just got sent to me a few times over. I'm actually. Yeah, I'm.
All right. So what's going on here, Tony? Are you there?
So, I think it's funny that really idiotic drawing thing I did, just fantasizing in a weird way of what would happen if Big City Greens took over Living with the Land is now circulating. But yeah, and apparently Shane Houghton, or Houghton, how you want to say it, however they say it, caught wind of it and agrees. He wants that to happen. So
who is Shane? Who is this Shane Houghton?
He's one of the creators of Big City Greens. Sorry, he and his brother Chris created the Disney Channel series, the hit Disney Channel series, Big City Greens, based on their life in the Midwest. And yeah.
So let me make sure I understand this. You wrote an article just for fun. Yep. Saying how fun would it be if Big City Green took over the land attraction?
Well, I said so the full backstory, and this is like the first three paragraphs of that article also, but I'll sum it up. I was there with a friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine, and we were talking about how somehow Living with the Land has gone completely overlooked and has dodged the IP bullet somehow. And we were talking like, well, what's going to take it over? And my first initial thought was Wall-E. And then he goes, oh, I thought you were going to say Big City Greens, like the Living with the Land presented by the Green Family Farms. And the first 5 minutes of that 17-minute ride, I was like, oh my God, that could happen. And I sat there thinking how it could happen. And I actually was talking about it with our CEO, and he goes, write that. So I did. And yeah, so I came up with how it could be done. And apparently everything I said and then posted, and I drew that main picture that I used as the featured there, which is basically a quick version of Bill Green's head over the mural, and it got the creator's attention, and he just said, "Yes, please."
So is this the highlight of your career?
It's up there, but if I've peaked now, then I might as well just end it.
Well, no,
I'll tender my resignation.
On the way up. But the highlight thus far,
it's been good.
That's pretty cool.
Actually, I talked with Shane and his brother Chris for a while, which is also on Laughing Place. That interview, and that was more of a highlight than him saying yes, please. So I just say if it happens, brothers, you know where to find me. So call me up. We'll work on it together.
Thank you, Tony. Let's get back to work again. Write some more cool articles like that.
Yep.
All right. Next up on the fun stuff. So Kyle put something in Slack this morning that I had no idea what he was talking about. And then finally the article appeared.
Yes, they're fine. These were at Magic Kingdom. I know Tony got one on day one, make sure he got one. And not only are they still around, but now they're moving them outside of the park so that more people can spend their money buying these Mr. Toad popcorn buckets, quote unquote. Don't know why they didn't just ship them to Disneyland, because that seems like they'd move a few units. This, yeah, now you can purchase these at Disney Springs Exposition Park. I don't quite know where that is, honestly.
I don't either. Is Tony? Where's
Tony's
Exposition
waiting.
Park?
I do believe that's the food truck area across from the old Virgin Mega store, which is now Splitsville.
Yeah, that makes sense. Where they have when they do that, bring all the cars there, and they have the little. You guys don't know. You don't have kids. Okay, thanks.
Okay, bye.
So Mr. Toad apparently did not sell out.
Yeah, maybe they were hoping for a Figment style hit on their hands, or maybe they ordered whatever this second. Because remember, they had to stop selling. They sold out of the initial Figment and then had to buy more and put those on sale. So maybe they got closer to that combined 2 shipments for this Mr. Toad, and then there's just not as much love.
Is there a chance the popcorn bucket mania has peaked?
Yes.
People are realizing these are just plastic thingies.
And that there's not really any real application after you put it on your shelf.
And finally, in terms of fun stuff today, the Disney is celebrating, or the El Capitan Theater is celebrating 100 years of Disney by showing 4 films made over the past 100 years of Disney, especially the most recent 30 years. Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, Aladdin, and Frozen on New Year's Day. For only $40, you can see all 4 films, get a cool credential, get a drink, a D100, Disney 100 popcorn container, and a collectible print. Starts at 12 o'clock, and 4 great films, right? Let me double check that. Yeah, I'd say 4 great films. You agree, Kyle?
Yeah, I think so.
4 great films? No question. So, if I was in LA, I would consider this. I mean, I'm not the type to get plastered on New Year's Eve, so this would be a great way to spend New Year's Day.
Yeah, I think of these 4, I'd be most excited to see Aladdin on the big screen, but I think
Why don't you rank them?
I saw the Beauty and the Beast re-release however many years ago when they were doing that. Remember for a hot minute when they were doing the 3D re-releases?
Yes. Yeah. Wow.
Ranking these, Aladdin's my favorite. Then I guess Beauty, Lion King, Frozen.
Yeah, that's wrong.
I say it like a question, but
we've got Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, Frozen, and then Aladdin. If it was Aladdin live action, yeah, but Aladdin animated, it's not that good. Not that good.
Frozen. So you mean if it was Aladdin musical spectacular, perhaps?
That I love. But I actually prefer the Aladdin live action starring Will Smith to the Aladdin animated. All right. Anything else I should mention, Kyle?
I haven't seen anything, but we've also been on the air for an hour and 15 minutes where I haven't really seen much.
just monitoring feed and stuff. Let me take a quick look at what we
see if we
posted
turn
on
the
our
stop
site.
around from all they're talking.
Well, Universal Studios, I know this is a Disney show, but Universal Studios has a bunch of new wands coming, and that's pretty exciting for each global Wizarding World destination. So I actually do think that's pretty exciting. I'm a big fan of that place, Wizarding World with Harry Potter. Check this Twitter real quick. Orlando Epic Universe work is right on track, according to the Orlando Sentinel and a Universal executive. Yeah. All right. As I said, later on today, we are going to be we should be back on right about 5:30. We're going to be live with Jeremiah and or Mike as they are out to see Walt's plane and its new home in Palm Springs. And also, we've got some people that are going to be at the National Treasure red carpet. National Treasure coming to Disney Plus soon. And the red carpet is tonight, and we'll have some people there. So we're hoping to do some live from 2 locations, plus obviously any news that breaks today, we will be talking about at that point. And if any big news breaks today between now and then, we'll go live as it happens. That's why you always want to be watching us on LPTV. You'll always know when we go live. We're actually going to close out today. Instead of just ending the stream, we're going to show something that was recorded over the weekend, I believe, at Comic-Con, if I am not mistaken. Yep, at LA Comic-Con, the Mike recorded. It's a 30th anniversary panel for X-Men the animated series. It's a lengthy panel, and we're just going to show the whole thing. We hope you enjoy it. So let me get that ready here. And then hopefully, as I'm going about the rest of my workday, I don't forget this is showing in the background and like reboot my machine or something. All right, Kyle, it's been great talking to you. Look forward to doing it again tomorrow.
All right. Sounds like a good plan.
Take care.
Bye.
There y'all go. Enjoy X-Men, the animated series 30th anniversary panel at LA Comic-Con 2022. With audio.
Thank you so much, Trey. I'm X-Men expert Jake Wallace, and I'll be your moderator this morning. So you love it, I love it. It's X-Men the animated series, and it's the 30th anniversary. So let's talk about the fantastic panel. He developed X-Men the animated series, he served as showrunner, and he's the author of the fantastic book, Previously on X-Men, and the co-author of The Art and Making of X-Men the Animated Series, Eric Lee Walt. She wrote the episodes Days of Future Past Part 1 and Whatever It Takes, and co-wrote The Art and Making of X-Men the Animated Series, Julia Lee Walt. Not only did he serve as a producer and art director on the show, but he directed all 76 episodes, Larry Houston. Now this next panelist needs no introduction, does she, Sugar? She's the voice of Rogue, Lenore Zahn. And he wrote many classic episodes, including Captive Hearts and A Rogue's Tale, Bob Skur. So in honor of the show's 30th anniversary, we thought today we'd talk a lot about the development of the show, how it got off the ground, its premiere in season 1. We are going to get right into it. So Eric, can you tell us about getting the green light on the series and the extremely quick turnaround for season 1?
Absolutely. It was Sunday night. We're at home. Get the call. You're going to be doing X-Men. I said, well, that's a Marvel book, right? And so that shows my background with the X-Men. Luckily, Larry knew them backwards and forwards. Bob knew them backwards and forwards. So I had a few people to ask questions of. But the quick turnaround was that Margaret Lesh, this wonderful woman that made this all possible, who had just been made the head of Fox Kids, been trying for 10 years to get the show on the air with no interest from anybody else in town. She got it going, and she said, well, you know, I know Batman's been in development for a whole year, but can you still catch up? We've got 7 months till September. It was February. So he said, just write as fast as you can, draw as fast as you can. We'll try to get 13 episodes up and running for people and pray that it works out. So we started like 3 months behind, and that, or certainly like a year behind Batman. And there was a certain energy to that. You know, there's no like second thinking things through. Well, maybe we can do something different. Just first stories we got. Done. Larry, first images that come to your mind, draw them off to the animators in Korea. So it was a absolute dive in the deep end, cross our fingers, hope, pray that it gets done, that it turns out, and it ended up being the most amazing show any of us had ever worked on. How that all came together is a mystery, but it really was. Larry's worked on 95 shows. Julie and I worked on 50. Nothing came together like this creatively, and there were a lot of fights early on. People said it's not going to work. It needs to be younger. It needs to dumb it down, take the big words out, make it more for 6-year-olds. And all of us agreed that was terrible. It would ruin the show. And so there's a lot of fighting that first year. Hold it together and get it done, and as fast as we could. And then once it came out and you guys all made it a hit. Everybody was happy with it. So no more
Okay, so Larry, what were your first design responsibilities when you came on the show, and did you have any trepidation about the job since it was already so behind schedule?
Believe it or not, I had what we would say between ourselves. I've done a lot of what they call triage. directing where I had to take something that's like, you know, a month or two behind and jump in deep water and get production in back on schedule. No, with the X-Men, it's something was involved with Margaret Lesh when we did the first, prior to the X-Men, I was one of the 3 co-directors of that. And so as far as the designs and drawing and stuff, I was on board way long time ago with Margaret about doing the X-Men, and she really tried to get it on the air, but it didn't work. The zeitgeist just wasn't there. And so fast forward about 6 years later, when she became the CEO of Fox Kids, that's when she called me and Eric and Rick Holberg and Will Mineo and others, and we put together this version of the show that you guys saw that first season. As far as the duties of being an art director, the 3 of us in the beginning were all designing the characters. Will and Rick and myself, we were designing that initial set, Professor X and Jubilee and the whole 9 yards. And the 3 of us were all old fanboys. I mean, we have directing skills, but we're fanboys. And so we were like gung-ho. I mean, we really want to do the show and do it the right way and add the blacks so it looked like the comic books and everything. So we were ready and willing, and we wanted to do an accurate version of the comic books. Take the books, put it on the air. You know, that was our motto. That's what we wanted to do. And luckily we were successful at it. But man, like Eric was saying, there were so many speed bumps, I call them, along the way, that almost derailed the entire series. We stuck it out and stuck to our guns and got the version out that you guys saw. And I have to thank all you guys, because without you guys keeping the ratings at the very top, it's either us or Power Rangers, we got to pick up the season 2. So I want to thank you guys.
Okay, Julia, this one's for you. So you wrote the first part in Days of Future Past, which is the only season 1 story that is heavily adapted from the comics. Did you find adapting with existing source material helpful or a hindrance?
Taking the Wayback Machine to 1992, and there was no internet. There was no way to Google this stuff. And X-Men was already, the train had left the station. So Bob was the one who knew the books chapter and verse, and he wrote part 2 of Days of Future Past. But we were never in the same writer's room. There was no writer's room. I was working off of a dining room table, because it was such a shoestring budget. There wasn't much going back and forth. It was more the arrogance of ignorance that we were given this crown jewel. I was given a chance to work on this crown jewel, but you can't use Kitty Pryde, and they're not going to use the mental thing to go back. They're going to send someone back. It's like, what? Well, okay. And when they first asked us to work on it, they didn't know if they were going to approve the adaptation of it, so it was called Future Tense as sort of a placeholder until Marvel, okay, close enough. Off we ran.
Great.
Do you mind if I add to that? I got the call from Eric saying we want to do Days of Future Past, we want to do it with Bishop instead of Kitty Pryde. And I'm like, oh my God, that's brilliant. Because Bishop was kind of new to the book, and in every issue, they go, you'd be like, Bishop, you'd be like, I hate Gambit. I'm going to kill Gambit because he's, well, I'll tell you next issue. And they never got around to doing it. They just kept teasing it. And I'm like, this is a really great chance to tie up something the comics aren't tying up. And so, so when Eric asked me about doing Bishop, I'm like, this is fantastic. And so it wound up being a really great opportunity to take an existing story, an existing classic, and to put just enough of a new spin on it to make it serve the books. So yeah. So thank you.
Next question for you. How did you first hear about X-Men casting voice actors? And can you tell us your first memories of recording as Rogue?
Well, sugar, my first hearing about the show was from my Canadian Toronto agent, who said, Lenore, they're doing this cartoon series, it doesn't have a title yet. It's just they're calling it like a Project X, like it's a secret project. And you got to go down and audition because they want a woman with a low, sexy, husky voice who can do a Southern accent. And I had played Southerners on movies and television a few times at that point in time. But I had also just gotten back to Toronto from New York, where I'd been doing a play for, I did a play for about 3 years in Chicago, New York, Mexico City, Winnipeg, Toronto. Like I've been on this long run of a play. And I said, well, I don't know if I'm really interested in doing cartoons. I'm a serious actress, movies and television, theater, that was the attitude at the time. So I didn't go to the auditions. But a few months later, my agent called me again and she said, Lenore, would you please get over to these auditions? They're having callbacks and they still haven't found the right actor for the part because it's you. So I went down and I saw a picture of Rogue from a cell just standing there, with her hand on her hip and the attitude. And I went, oh yeah, I can do that. And then I walked in the booth and I said, my daddy liked to kill himself when he found out I was a mutant. That was, I think, my first line. And then it was a little tiny monologue of, I remember I had me a boyfriend when I was 13. Had me a boyfriend until I kissed him. Poor boy went into a coma for 3 days. That was the next part. And I heard these guys in the LA booth, miles away screaming and going, that's the voice. And that was it. That was how it started.
Oh yeah, we were all listening to her. We had heard all these different tryouts, and when we heard her in unison, we were all going, oh my God, don't let her leave the studio. Sign her up now.
I don't know what it is, but Larry oftentimes calls our show the success and everything that went into it, lightning in a bottle. And I'd say that was a moment that day. So thank you all. And I'm so grateful to be here.
So let's talk about the series premiere, which is Night of the Sentinels. Why did you choose to use the Sentinels in the first episode instead of Magneto, who is the X-Men's most famous villain?
This is a big deal. Well, we owe our dear friend Will Mineo, who worked with Larry for 30 years.
Yes.
And was a major part in setting the tone and the focus and everything creative about this show. We owe him. There were 2 reasons that we stuck with the Sentinels. One was he understood that they were an image of humanity, distrust of mutants, and that's where we all wanted to focus. There are a bunch of the books where it's just supermassive being battling other supermassive being at the WWE. So there are a lot of books. I mean, that's fun, and you're a kid, you enjoy reading those. But there are other sections of the books over the 30 years we had to pick from. There's much more about how do you live as a mutant in this larger society that doesn't quite understand you and is afraid of you. And the Sentinels were the perfect incarnation of that. He chose them because there was a story he really liked about learning the X-Men through the eyes of a young new recruit, which I agree with Mark Eden's, who was the pilot, and I agreed with completely. So the Sentinels were crucial for that, to set the tone for the series. There is a bit of a story. There was someone at Marvel, an executive who I never met, but after we finished setting up this world, we just killed ourselves for about a month, set up the world, finished the first script, and we got this 8-page memo saying, oh, you guys got it completely wrong. Magneto's more important than the Sentinels. Throw all this stuff out, start from scratch. Some of your characters are okay, but basically you screwed it. So do this over, please. And it wasn't our main guy at Marvel, so I said, why is this guy writing us an 8-page memo? And does he have the power to shut us down? Because we got it on a Friday, and there were no cell phones, no internet. We were faxing angrily at each other. And we we thought, is the show over? Has someone in Marvel decided that no, we need to do something completely different? And luckily, our buddy Will not only knew the books better than this guy did, but he had 20 years in animation and knew that our story fit animation perfectly, and that's why we chose the Sentinels to be the ongoing thread in the first season. We introduced Magneto in episode 3. That was real quick because he's important, but that was the Sentinels were crucial to start the story with.
Do you mind if I add to that a little bit? Sure. I was kind of a mind, because that's how it was in the book, that Magneto happens first and he triggers, he's the reason that the Sentinels are built. And so I was like, well, it should be Magneto first. And Eric, I think, is, his counterintuitive approach was exactly right, because, whereas Magneto is the most famous threat to the X-Men, he is by no means their biggest threat. The biggest threat of all their villains, of Apocalypse and whoever else, their biggest threat is bigotry. The fact that they're in a world that hates and fears them. And the reason they're such incredible heroes, and they are sworn to protect a world that hates and fears them. So entering with the prejudice and entering with the Sentinels was counterintuitive, and it was brilliant. It was exactly right. It's one of the reasons I think Eric was perfect to spearhead the series, because, I've been reading the books ever since Giant Size X-Men #1, and I was beholden to all the stories, because the stories weren't stories, they were history. And Eric wasn't invested that way, so coming in with the objectivity that he did gave him the power to make this series its own thing and bring in a brand new audience for whom it was all very fresh, which I'm sure pretty much everybody here was the case. So I'm really grateful that they picked Eric, and that they didn't get, like a Mr. Fanboy like me who'd be so beholden to the books. So bravo to Fox and bravo to Eric. And that's Margaret Lesh, when she was spearheading the series, there were people over her. She didn't run everything. She had bosses, and they were not sure about this X-Men cartoon. And what she said was, I believe in this to the degree where if this is not a hit, I will leave. And their response was, fantastic. We will show you the door. So she invested everything. She bet the farm on the series, and God bless her.
Yeah. About the show's launch. So you premiered on Halloween 1992 in prime time.
Yeah.
And then followed up with the second episode a week later. But the show didn't actually start airing on Saturday mornings until the following January.
Yes.
When did you know the show was a massive success?
January. We knew people liked it from the first couple sneak previews. There was also another sneak preview in Thanksgiving. Again, the same episode. And the answer part, we bumped into a fan who was angry because he said, well, then it came on in January, and it was the same episode again. Right. But we knew we got big numbers the first week, and by the third week, it was the biggest show on Saturday morning by a big margin. And so all right. We did, because we'd had all this struggle to keep it a certain way, and we kept being told that that's way too adult, it's way too dark, it's too challenging. The kids won't be able to follow all these characters. But no, the kids followed all the characters and they loved it. So it all paid off, and again, no pushback for the next 4 years.
Yeah. For me, it was like when I knew the show had ratings, but I didn't know if people liked the show. And it wasn't until Julia went to Fox to ask them, did they like the show? And she came up with this story about that she went to, I think I can't remember the girl's name, but Charlotte Fullerton. She asked, is there any fan mail? Does people like the show? And she told Julia, come to the hallway. So she went to the hallway. And if you get too much mail, the mailman puts it in this container. Well, she had a container full of postcards, letters, stacked here to the ceiling, far back as you can, on both sides of the aisle, of the corridor. And I had never seen any of it. Because we had seen it, we would have answered some of them. But that's when I found out that there was a real good audience. We were touching a lot of lives, a lot of kids' lives. They enjoyed the show. That's when I found out people liked the show for me.
Great. All right. So we are now going to.
Can I just add one
yes,
really little quick thing? The actors in the show, because the main team, we were all in Toronto in Canada. We never heard about how successful the show was. We didn't hear the story about the mail. We never got any of that fan mail, which was directed to a lot of us as well, and we would have answered it. We didn't find out until a few years ago. We found out when we went to a Comic-Con.
They weren't told because they would have asked.
Anyway.
So now we're going to move on from season 1 into season 2 and do a special discussion on the episode A Rogue's Tale, because not only do we have Lenore, the voice of Rogue, but we have Bob, who wrote the episode. So Bob, I'm going to start with you. This episode seems to pull a lot of elements from Avengers Annual number 10, which is Rogue's first appearance, and also Uncanny X-Men number 269, which is the issue where Rogue's mind is being taken over by Carol Danvers. As a big X-Men fan, did you go back and reread any issues before writing this, or was this all just stuff pulled from memory?
This was all stuff pulled from my DNA. I remember the day, I remember the place, I remember everything about when I got Avengers Annual number 10. I mean, it was one of my favorite books. It was my favorite introductions to a character. And I always loved Rogue because, okay, this is going to be hard to believe. Go back and look at the letters pages. When Chris Claremont announced that Rogue was going to be joining the X-Men, all the letters said, if you put her in this book, I will stop buying it. Because she was such a vile character when you first meet her. And I loved her because, I mean, she's so conflicted. I mean, she and Wolverine, you know? The thing about her is she's a very visceral person. She's a very physical person. She's a very passionate person. And she can't have physical contact with anybody. That's a tragic character. And you know, my goal with the episode was there were things in the series that we had done that were at variance to the comics. I mean, there was a scene where she's standing next to Mystique and they don't even, you know, sort of acknowledge each other. And I'm thinking, okay, I want to do an episode where at the very end of it, Rogue is exactly the same person in our series as she is in the comics. And so I wanted to reconcile all of that. And I figured the best way to do that is to tell the origin story that Chris Claremont had hinted at, but never actually told. And I figured this is a chance to tell a story that has the potential to be really, really powerful. So we did an episode, and you know, God bless everybody who was completely supporting this. That I think is a really, it touches on a lot of amazing themes, and it doesn't do so in any heavy hand. I want to throw some light on somebody else who was extremely instrumental in this series, an executive named Sidney Wanter, who did another series called Batman, the animated series. And he was so passionate about making sure that this series was, you know, filled with angst and filled with character, and you know that this was going to be a serious-minded show with serious themes. And he approached Batman with the same seriousness, although from very different angles. And so, you know, when you hear about the myth of, you know, the network doesn't understand it, the network doesn't get it, oh, those executives. No, Sidney was on top of this, and he was a guiding light, and he's one of the fundamental reasons on why the series, and he fought the fights, man. He fought the good fights. So thank God for him, and I'm really, again, just really grateful to have the opportunity to tell the Rogue story, because I couldn't get to write the Wolverine episode because I recommended the guy who created Wolverine to write for the series, so he got the chance to write that episode because I recommended him for the show. No good deed ever goes unpunished. So for my sins, I was forced to write this Rogue.
Thank you, Sugar.
So, Lenore, do you remember your reaction after you read the script for this episode for the first time?
Well, I think every actor loves it when they get a script that's about their character. You know, I have to say, it was nice. I think it's in the second season. And so it was like, oh, great. Finally, we get a chance to really dig in and find out who Rogue is, who she was, her origin story, what makes her who she is. And I could relate to it because being a little girl from Australia, from Sydney, Australia, who was an only child who moved to Canada with my parents when I was 8. And I had this funny Australian accent to start with that the Canadian kids couldn't really understand. And then moving from like the western part of Canada, Regina, Saskatchewan, to Nova Scotia on the East Coast, and changing schools a number of times. I always felt different. And within the last name that starts with Z or Z, as you say here, it was like I was always at the end, always in the back rows, always like all these other kids in my classes had names like McDonald and McGinnis and all this, normal sounding names. And I was the only Z ever. And so when I got to Rogue, I did a lot of traveling around too as a young woman in my early 20s. I really was searching for myself. And so I felt Rogue searching for herself and trying to find out where she belonged and who her, for want of a better word, who her tribe was. Who would accept her and where she would feel she could be herself and be her authentic self without fear. Because especially after her dad kicks her out of home and says, you're not my child. So for me, that was all so much beautiful angst. And I was able to really dig in and do a performance that I felt proud of. And and the stuff with Carol Danvers as well, and the mental anguish of trying to wrestle with a different personality that's stuck in your head. I've had female impersonator friends who tell me, you try living with 26 different women inside of you. So I got it.
And were you surprised at how many times you have to scream in this script? And did you ever hurt your voice?
No, because I was kind of a scream queen in Canada. We did a lot of horror movies at that time. So in the 80s, I did a lot of features where I was screaming a lot, usually in my underwear, getting murdered in various ways, because that's what they do to young women in their 20s in horror films. At least I didn't have to be naked in this one.
Come on, my attic. You really hit it out of the park in that episode. Although they didn't do a very good vetting process, let's face it. I mean, they get an Australian actor to play an X-Men. That never happened again, thank God.
You're right.
Okay, so now we have a very special treat for you guys. We pulled some X-Men fan communities for the top 5 Rogue lines, and Lenore is going to read these out.
Oh, lighten up, sugar. That's the first one. Do you remember that one? Lighten up, sugar. I love that one. Oh yes, I could spit on him if I wasn't a lady. My daddy always said 2's company and 3's an eavesdropper. You gonna shut up or am I gonna have to help you? And my favorite, you look as nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs.
You can see it from where you're sitting, but half of you now belong with that.
It's funny, sometimes when I start to talk to fans when they come to the table, I don't know if anybody's here today who this happened yesterday, but suddenly they get kind of overcome and verklempt, and it's almost like they're about to faint, and they get very teary-eyed. Okay, it happened to you. It happened to, oh yes, that's right. One time I was on a boat, on a ferry, and these young girls came up to me and they said that they knew who I was, and they said that their friend was with them, this guy, and he loved Rogue and loved the X-Men. Would you please talk to him as Rogue and surprise him? And I did, and this guy fainted. I don't don't even have to touch them. I hope I leave you with good memories when you're kids. I think that's my main goal in life.
Okay, so we are now going to open up the floor to fan questions. So if anyone has a question, please just line up right here in the middle. And there's no microphone, so when you ask your question, please project. And we do have to ask a huge favor. No one is more excited about X-Men 97 than me, but we cannot answer any questions about it. It's all under wraps, so please keep your questions to the original animated series.
We can tell you that none of us are actually, well, we have some consultants up here, but none of us who work in the original series were invited to write for it. Just putting that out there.
Ready? You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So first is just a comment. The Scream Queen thing makes a lot of sense now because I remember the episode when Rogue absorbed Juggernaut's power, and that scream is still kind of echoing 30 years into the future.
Oh my God.
Then the other one's a question for everybody here. Of the entire series, for each of you, who is your favorite X-Men villain?
Well, so we had to love them all when we were writing them. I think my favorite villain voice is Apocalypse, which John Holocaust created, which was the very first Klingon, which we didn't know when we were writing. It just breaks our nerd hearts that we didn't know we were writing for Commander Core. But his voice and Magneto's character, his relationship with Xavier, is my favorite relationship in the whole series.
Just Xavier and Charles, like I know them, Xavier and Charles, Xavier and Magneto, that complete commitment to their particular angle of looking at things, but their genuine affection for each other, but also friends of humanity are scary. There's no major, like one bad guy, friends of humanity. They're just these clusters that show up and do damage. Those terrify me.
Yeah. I'm on the same camp with Eric. It's, Apocalypse and Magneto together are like the best bad guys that X-Men can face. But also, like in the episode, she's talking about the Friends of Humanity. I'm not sure which writer wrote it, but the guy who was the head of the Friends of Humanity was actually the son of Sabretooth and Mystique.
Yeah.
And there's one scene where he's talking, Jubilee is tied up, and she asks him, "Why do you hate us? We've done nothing to you." And he turns to him and says, "Because you were born." Yeah. That line, like when I read it in the script, it's like, ooh, well, that's strong.
I think that was from Michael Eden's, and we talked about it kind of like there's a great movie of Man in the Last Booth where there's a tortured person that they're indicting the Nazis, and the person's actually who's standing there pretending to be a Nazi general projecting his evil is actually Jewish. I mean, it's torturing him. So we just wanted to, I think Michael's capable of that because he was born. That was strong.
Thank you. Thank you for asking questions.
Thank you. Next question.
Well,
Oh, sorry. Oh my God, sorry.
I have a lot of favorite
question
villains,
asker.
but the villains that I like the most are the ones who have the most of a great rationale for their feelings. So you can't get past Magneto. He used to, when they first introduced him, he was the head of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And I always thought, why would he have evil? It's the Brotherhood of Mutants because he's fighting for his people. He's going to make sure that his people are going to thrive by any means necessary. And so you have this, and also I love Callisto because she was a leader and she was looking after her people the same way. My favorite villain, it doesn't even classify as a villain. It's all the inner turmoil that the characters have. It's all the, it's having to overcome the fact that you can't have physical intimacy despite the fact that you're a visceral person. It's all the stuff Wolverine is dealing with. By the way, Margaret Lash, who championed the series, her favorite character was Wolverine. And it was because he had so much inner conflict. And to me, more than the villains they fight, that's all. It's like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The monster du jour is, well, that's all interesting and fun, but it's really about the relationships and the fact that these characters are people. And that's the reason you're all here, is because the characters aren't superheroes with powers. They're people with conflicts, and it makes them so powerful. That's why people have continued to respond to these characters.
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, big fan of the show, loved it. Was not alive in '92. Did watch it though. And my question is that this is definitely, I think, the most expansive adaptation of the X-Men that we've ever gotten in terms of you getting all the stories that you guys got to cover and all the characters you got to bring in the different episodes. Is there a story or a specific character that you never got to deal with or work in and you wanted to?
Arcade.
I didn't have a story, but there was we did an episode where Cyclops discovers his father. Okay, and they have this huge father-son conflict. And the only small part of that I wish we had got to do is him discovering his other brother that he's in I think X-Force or something. That's the only little. It's not a story. It's just a little sidebar. That's the only thing I wish we had done. I'm good. That's everything.
In the comics, they used to not just fight other mutants; they used to fight other, villains. And so occasionally they'd be fighting people like Doctor Doom. And I would love to have brought in some other Marvel characters for them to fight. Although, those were all beholden to other properties. But it would have been really boss to have them fight Doctor Doom and go to Liberia and maybe help a mutant.
That would have been a lot more contracts.
Hello, might I say, back in the day, '92, I was 2 years old. So I didn't get to the show till a little later. But, that was a perfect era for the kids who had TV but couldn't afford the books. That was an excellent time for amazing stories, for great, expansive backgrounds for characters that relate to you. Heroes with problems. You never think about that till you see it, read it. So it was amazing. But my question is, were there ever moments, it's a little bit during this time, that Stan Lee ever came to you guys and told you, I would love for this to be in there? Go ahead.
Larry. Larry and I made Stan Lee is the most energetic, creative, intense man. When we were doing the show, I was in my early 30s and he was 69. Now these incredible young people that are doing the new show, which we can't talk about, are in their early 30s, and I'm 67. So I'm having this strange mirror experience when you ask about dealing with Stan. Stan had more confidence in any human being I'd ever met, and he believed he could step into any television show, even if he didn't know who the characters were, even if he didn't know what the plots were, and he could make that a wonderful show. I mean, I see he probably had so many hundreds of different comics dumped in his lap over 40 years, whatever. And at the time we were doing the show, Marvel was a small comic book company. They were having financial troubles, whatever. And Stan had been at his height with the comics in the 60s and 70s. And when Marvel came to us to do the show, they said, you've got 30 years of X-Men stories behind you, but you have to make it your own show. It's a TV show, animation's different. We understand that, we respect that. So please don't worry about living up to about mimicking the books or, so we're focused on that, we're developing the show. And Stan stepped in and said, after we'd written about 8 of the scripts, and said, oh, I think I'd like to change the show all around. So to answer your question, Stan would take over any show he could. It was a lot of things. And we just had to have gentle back and forth for about a month to make him realize that the show that he had written in 63, 64 with Jack Kirby, the books he'd written, that was like a completely different era. It was a bunch of teenagers, almost no women in it. It was like a different. It was like we said, like Pat Boone records, and we're doing Nirvana. Our audience is 90s grunge, and the suggestions are doo-wop. They're wonderful doo-wop, but
It just, if we try to fit the two together, and we sat down with Margaret, we sat down with her boss, and just said, we need to have one direction, and we love Stan. And there's a chapter in one of the books I wrote that says, how do you say no to Stan Lee? It's a 10-page chapter. It's a lot.
The thing is that we had a relationship, myself and Will Mayo and Rick Over, before where we had done Pride of the X-Men, and Stan was the narrator of the show. And so by the time we got this version ready to roll it, Stan kind of like injected himself into it. We had the experience of, he had a prior experience where he was in charge of the show and he took it over. So with this version, Will got the, he got the luck, he drew the short straw, and he got in there, Margaret said, yeah, Stan can't be involved, you will tell him. And so that's where it happened.
Yeah.
Am I remembering correctly that he wanted to narrate this series?
Oh, yes, he did. He wanted to narrate all 76 episodes.
Yeah.
Well, that turned out to be 76 episodes, like, look, there's that cute young girl from, they can't touch people. I wonder what she's up to today.
Yeah. Heads up, Beaver Storm's about to use her power.
So for another show that's wonderful, for our show, it just would have turned it upside down. And so it didn't.
It didn't happen. Yeah.
All right, we have time for one more quick fan question.
Okay. I was there every Saturday morning, big fan. The opening intro theme song is the greatest TV theme song ever. So can you talk about how the intro sequence came to be?
Sure, it's real simple. Ron Wasserman, who wrote it and didn't get an extra penny for it, playing 73 billion times in the last 30 years, but who wrote it and wrote the Power Rangers opening as well. This guy was pushed by Larry and Will Mayo and Sydney to make it more and more intense, more and more intense, more and more intense. Because you work at Savant. Savant usually, you write something, you hand it in, doesn't matter how limp it is, it just goes out. Right. And they were just saying, this is not X-Men yet. This is not intense enough yet. And so you had to keep adding stuff, and you rolled his eyes and said, man, I sweated this one. But it was Sydney and Larry and Will pushing him, and on the other side, Larry can talk to it. Larry and Will, over basically a weekend, did the entire credit sequence, drew that whole minute, and they did one draft, and
we were saying before, when the show started, we were like 3 months behind, and so I was given a weekend. Okay, draw the titles. So I drew almost 2 minutes of imagery, weaving stuff together. And then on Monday, when we came back and Will and Margaret took a look at it and said, okay, let's start, we did some small revisions and most of it remained intact. And then we took something that was like this long and brought it down to just a minute and 3 seconds. So it was like stream of consciousness, just draw, just put the images down. And then, when we finally got the final music that he's talking about, that was like version 15.
Yeah.
Because he had done, it took music that you would get from Saban, they would just do something and maybe spit it out. Like, okay, here it is. And you'd have to take it like the first and second version. No, we kept sending it back because we knew this is our last chance to do something good, and we weren't going to F it up. So send it back till we got something that really worked for the show.
And I think we can all agree we got that. Right now, could we get anyone who came today in X-Men cosplay to line up right here? We have a few copies of Eric and Julia's book, The Art and Making of X-Men, the animated series, to give away.
Well, you guys are laughing at that stuff. I just want to point out that if you watch the opening credits to X-Men, you've never seen, if you don't know anything about the characters, within 1 minute, you know who the characters are and how they fit in this world and exactly what the show is completely about within 1 minute without one word of narration. And it's, if you just look at it by itself, it is a thing of beauty. So Larry, amazing job. We're going to be doing the opening credit sequence for our X-Men series. I'm looking very forward to seeing what you do with the opening credits.
I am Doobie, and I am back, and you've been watching the X-Men the Animated Series 30th Anniversary panel at LA Comic-Con, filmed just this past weekend. While we were showing that, we did get some new news breaking, so let's get through some of that stuff before we say goodbye for a few hours, unless something else comes up. So I'm going to bring on Benji right here. How you doing, Ben?
Good. How are you?
Way to adjust
Busy,
that
but
camera.
good.
So looks like we got some Doctor Who news. Should I show the short before we?
Yeah, sure. It's just a little reel or whatever they call it, whatever you call it,
Yeah.
TikTok or whatever.
Short.
Now.
It's called a YouTube short.
Yeah. But
Reel on
it's
Instagram.
everywhere. It's not just on YouTube.
Instagram Reel, YouTube short. Here we go.
Ooh. So, I mean, basically, the news there is that the new season of, or what they call in the United Kingdom, series of Doctor Who is begun production. We know David Tennant returning in sort of a twist, but as Disney fans, what we care about, it's the first series that will be handled outside of the UK on Disney Plus. So this is, unfortunately, Luke is off today. He's our resident Doctor Who expert, but this is going to be a big deal. I mean, Doctor Who is sort of that one of those fandoms. They're bringing back this, I don't want to say the original creative team, but the original creative team of the rebooted show. So it's expected to kind of draw an extra set of eyes on it. And is just another sort of, well, Disney doesn't own the franchise. They are deeply involved in the season. As it goes through as it will be going through the Disney ecosystem outside of the UK. So exciting news for, I think, Disney Doctor Who fans, but also Disney fans, because it'll bring some new eyeballs to Disney Plus and hopefully what Disney has to offer outside of that.
This may be a better question for Luke, but maybe you're into the zeitgeist. What is the Doctor Who community's reaction been to the Disney collaboration?
I think it got overshadowed by the surprise of David Tennant returning. I think that caught everyone off guard because they had announced who the next Doctor is going to be. So and not David Tennant. So it was kind of a twist ending. So I think the Disney news kind of got caught off guard. Luke would probably be able to tell you, as what people feel about the streaming service. But I think in the end, especially in the UK, America, where you have to pay for it essentially anyway with cable or whatnot, not a huge game changer. But I didn't get a lot of people who were talking about that at the time. So
I'm looking at the Doctor Who Twitter, which presumably their biggest fans. They obviously tweeted this as well, and just looking at the quote tweets from that, and lots of excitement, as you mentioned. The Doctor seeing nothing negative, not even seeing the word Disney. So I consider that a good thing, I think. All right, and then I think there was a couple of other items we wanted to mention here. D23 has a contest going on.
Sure, and so D23 is doing basically what they're calling the D23 Days of Giving. So every day there's a new contest on their website, and so today I believe it is D23 Seasons of Magic presented by a Target. And today's prize is a Disney Princess Pack.
Am I a day late here with this Marvel button? Yes, this is the December 4th prize. Sorry about that.
Which is a Disney Princess Ultimate Celebration Castle Dollhouse by Hasbro, which you can actually see. I think Alex did a review of this. A Disney Classic Doll Collection gift set and the book Frozen 5-Minute Stories. Also, if you're a Disney insider, movie insiders, they've been doing every weekday bonus points. And so you can go get the points today. And I thought I remembered what the thing was, oh, it's Drax. Today's code is Drax. So enter that today. You can also go look at their calendar and see what other what the other prizes are. What the other codes were for other days, so that you can get all the bonus points if you didn't hop on earlier. But today's code is Drax.
There's a lot to this company.
And then what Disney Parks blog recently talked about some of the conservation work that's happening at Disney. Some through the Disney Conservation Fund. And you can read the details. I don't really feel comfortable discussing what all these programs are without doing a deeper dive, but I do think it's interesting. Joe Rohde tweeted that saying, "Yay, Disney Conservation Fund." A recent New York Times article referred to the pious conservationism of Disney Animal Kingdom. Not sure pious is the right word, but if piety before nature yields these results, I'm all for it. So, obviously, Disney guests can donate through the Disney Conservation Fund, but also Disney makes donations as well. And there's one more thing: if you donate, Disney pays all the administrative costs, the cost of the button, all that stuff. You're not paying. It's not like they're getting 50 cents because there's an overhead. Everything actually goes to the projects if you donate through them. So keep that in mind next time you're there and they ask to sell you a button.
Joe Rohde, great tweet, great Twitter follow. He tweets about Disney. Not all the time, but plenty. He also loves to reply. So it's really interesting to follow him and read his replies. Disney fans will write him things, questions, comments. I'm just seeing one just from a couple of days ago where someone says, "Does it bother you when people touch things over the railing?" As they're talking about the Expedition Everest queue, and Joe Rohde says it's tempting, but if you touch them, they will wear out. And if they wear out, they're unlikely to be replaced by something quite as unique because they came from Nepal, Bhutan, India. So like I said, just a fun follow Joe Rohde as a Disney fan.
So I think we're going to get ready for the big evening.
Yeah, so tonight at 5:30 Pacific time, we'll be back on. We have Benji will be at the National Treasure red carpet. This is what he will take off his big parka with the hood and put on his press fedora with a little press thing in there and grab his giant camera with a big bulb and become paparazzi. And he'll be covering the National Treasure. Is Nick Cage expected to be there?
No, because not in the show.
But it's still his franchise. He could show up. All right. John Voight?
No.
The funny guy?
He might be there. He's in the show.
Okay. That's the most important character. And also tonight, Jeremiah and Mike Celestino will be seeing the debut of Walt's airplane. I think it must have taken it about September, October, about 3 months to make the flight from the Anaheim Convention Center to Palm Springs.
So a technical point. It's not, the plane's been there for a bit. They had a revealing. They're actually opening up an exhibit tied to the plane with more details. And they're supposed to be making an announcement as well. So,
okay. Thank you very much. So you can check that out tonight here at 5:30 is when they will be out there, and we'll get you that news and fun as quickly as we can. Until then, I think we'll probably be off the air unless news breaks, because whenever news breaks, we come on. So LPTV, laughingplace.com/TV. Thanks for joining us this morning, and we'll talk to you later.